My top 3 favorite back exercises. We will hit 2 lat exercises and 1 upper back exercise. These 3 exercises you could complete an entire back workout with. I would vary the order and how you want to structure them based on your individual needs. Now, is this everything you'd absolutely need to complete back? No, there's a few exercises you might add in. We can talk about those at the end, but these are some 3 primary ones that can make a very comprehensive back workout. And when we're talking about back, we're going to focus on the lats, traps, rear delts, rhomboids, and all the other smaller musculature that surrounds that part of the back. Number 1, first exercise is going to be a lat biased pull down. Now, for a lat biased pull down, we want something that's going to be slightly out in front of us, and there's lots of variations you can have. If you want to do a straight bar pull down with the elbow flared out a little bit more, you're absolutely going to still be training the lat. However, the lat functions really well when it starts getting that elbow a little bit more tucked closer to the body and finishing close to the hip. Now, where should be the stop point of where the lat's actually able to function well is if you're raising overhead and right before you start to internally rotate the arm and get directly overhead, the lat actually shortens a little bit. And so one function that we have for the lat is that it's going to help with translating this humerus back and forth. So if we see how the scapula can move in this plane, if we get overhead, we kind of lose that ability for the lat to function. So I do like a single arm pull down because of the versatility and being able to get this elbow tucked tight close to the body, and also the freedom of movement of where I can align my torso to get that translation and that scapula to protract around the rib cage. Now, to get a lot out of this movement, you want something to where you can brace with the other hand and counter some of that rotational force if you're deciding to do it single arm. Now, cueing for this is going to be driving this elbow down to the hip, as that's going to be your main function of how the lat's going to work. Now, bringing it back behind the back, the lat doesn't function to do that. So basically, we're ending with this humerus in line with the torso. Now, a cue that I like to let this back out, because what a lot of people tend to do is as they're going up, they let this arm rotate inward. And so cueing, push this hand away from you towards the wall, will help keep this lat engaged and also help not keep the bicep from contributing a lot to the movement. I would focus on just getting a full range of motion, letting that scapula fully protract, and then driving that elbow down to the hip. This will be your lat movement that'll work the lat in those lower lat fibers, a little bit more bias in that area. Of course, it's going to work the lat entirely, but put a little bit more focus there. And of course, with any of these back movements, traps, rear delts, all that musculature is going to be working as well. And you might say, John, I don't have that fancy Nautilus pull down machine. No problem. You don't have to do it on that. Just know that motion that you're trying to emulate. You can do it again with just a straight bar pull down. You can do it with a hamstring high row machine. You can do it single arm with a cable pull down. There's lots of variations you can do. The idea is just get that arm out in front of you and pull it down to the hip. Exercise number 2 is going to be a lat biased row. Now, with the lat biased row, we want to remember what we talked about in our pull down. The lat's going to really function well when this elbow is kept tight to the body. Also, pay attention how this humerus moves. It moves down and towards the hip. So if we're looking at machine setups, we kind of want one that emulates that path. So a lot of times if you're looking at a cable, cables usually move in a straight line, right? So it's hard for this humerus to want to move down towards the hip. You might actually see a lot of people are flaring out in those type of straight arm movements. This might even be the case if you're doing a bent over dumbbell row and it's moving straight in line. You might want to actually cue that arc to take place. So here's one exercise that works well. This is a Rogers row movement. I like this one because it does move this natural path. So what you can do for one is set this up, and I like something that has a chest brace so it actually counters this force pulling towards you. And you can use the other arm to also prevent that rotational component from twisting you. And we're going to do the same type of cueing that we did on our pull down, with for one, starting driving this hand down towards the ground. This is going to help cue our lat to function, have that depression take place. And then we're just going to cue, elbow back down to the hip. That's where the movement stops. To let it out, reverse that action. So still cueing that hand down to the ground and letting that scapula protract. A lot of mistakes you see is guys getting too confined and only moving with the bicep, not getting the full range of motion out of their lat. Let it all the way out and cue it back down to the hip. Now you might say, John, I don't have that Rogers rowing machine. What can I use instead? No problem. Any type of lat row machine where you can keep these elbows relatively close to the side of the body. Again, a little bit of flare out, completely fine. You're still gonna be working the lat. You could even do this on an incline bench with dumbbells in hand. That can work perfectly well. Just remember, all that cueing should be the same too. Even doing it on a seated cable row would be completely fine. You could do it single arm, or you could find an attachment that's about shoulder width. Make sure you're just cueing those elbows tucked tight to the body. So lots of variations that could take place within that for what you have for your gym equipment. And a third favorite exercise is gonna be some type of upper back biased row. There's lots of different variations that we can show for equipment wise. Also several different kind of arm paths that you can be in to work this entire upper back musculature, which we're kind of saying, well, upper back, hey, rear delts, traps, have a little bit of teres major involved. Probably some upper lat as well. A little bit more as the elbow gets tucked, a little bit more lat that's going to be involved within this. The idea though with this one is with our lat movements, we're not really cueing a lot to happen with the scapulas. We're really focusing on this humerus and where we want to do with that. Now with our upper back movement, we really want to focus on moving these scapulas a lot. Now, why I like a chest supported T-bar row is, for one, you're going to have a chest brace that's going to counter this force trying to pull you forward. If you're doing like a standing barbell row, that's the problem, is you're having to counter the force with your spinal erectors. So this creates a lot more stability in just training the intended musculature that we want, just the upper back. Now, for this movement, what we want to focus on, for one, is locking in a neutral spine. We don't want a lot of thoracic extension and flexion occurring. We want to utilize this chest brace like it's intended. You'll be like, oh, John, I can't breathe while I'm doing this. A lot of people sit up too high and put their diaphragm in their lower rib cage on the chest support, which is where that rib cage actually moves. So you might need to actually rotate forward a little bit, use more of your upper sternum to brace, and that's going to allow you to keep breathing. Now for this movement, what we want to do once we're in this bottom position is allow those scapulas to protract and wrap around the rib cage to fully lengthen that muscle. Now once we're there, the idea is driving those elbows back as far as you can and squeezing the scapulas together, and we can even allow a little bit of thoracic extension to take place, as that will fully retract the scapulas in doing so. Now let the movement out, we're just going to reverse and let those scapulas wrap back around the rib cage. The idea here is, on all these back movements, is control your eccentric. A lot of people just let the movement out too quick, and then for hypertrophy, that is such the money part of the range to get a good stimulus to occur. Now, we talked about with the lat row that we don't really move the elbow past the torso, but for upper back rows, we absolutely will. So we're driving that elbow back as far as we can. We're squeezing those scapulas together. Again, we'll have lots of variations that we can do beyond just our T-bar row. This one has your elbow a little bit more flared out. We absolutely could have our hands by the side and driving more in this upward plane, which would work more, even more of those upper trap as well. So we have, if you don't have a T-bar row, you absolutely could do it on an incline bench with dumbbells, or even a barbell for that matter. You could use any type of hammer strength rowing equipment to do so. Prime makes some great equipment too. So lots of variations you could have in place. And so use these 3 back exercises, add them into your program and see how they work for you. Let me know down below, what are your 3 favorite back exercises?